My name is Evelyn Harper. I'm 72 years old, a retired schoolteacher, and for most of my life, I believed love and sacrifice would guarantee respect from my only daughter. But I was wrong. I remember the moment as if it just happened yesterday. I was sitting in my kitchen, the afternoon light pouring through the window, when my phone rang. Vanessa, my 42-year-old daughter, was on the other end. Her tone was sharp, careless, like she was talking to a stranger and not her mother. She said, "The best gift would be if you were sick and away." My heart stopped. I had just offered to help her with $200,000 to start her new business. Instead of gratitude, she gave me those words, words that sliced through me deeper than any knife ever could. I felt my fingers tremble as I gripped the phone tighter, and in that silence, something inside me broke. I whispered, "If that's how you feel, Vanessa, then the funding is canceled." There was nothing but dead air on the line for a second, and then came the scream. "You'll regret this, Mom," she shouted so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. It was like venom being poured straight into my soul. Regret? For protecting myself from her cruelty? That moment shifted something in me forever, but it also forced me to look back at everything that led us here. How does a daughter come to despise her mother that much? What had I missed? And more importantly, what would happen next now that she knew I wasn't going to bend to her will? If your child told you that your very absence would be the best gift, what would you do? Would you forgive? Or would you finally stand up for yourself? Stay with me, because what happened after this phone call nearly destroyed me, but it also revealed who Vanessa truly was. And believe me, the story is only getting darker from here. It all started long before that day. My husband Walter had been gone for 10 years. He passed suddenly, a heart attack in his sleep, leaving me to raise Vanessa alone. She was already in her early 30s when it happened, but somehow, losing her father seemed to deepen her bitterness toward me. I thought grief would bring us closer, but instead, it pushed her further away. I worked for decades as a schoolteacher, saving every penny I could. I never bought myself the luxury handbags or big vacations like other women my age. I wanted my daughter to have everything I didn't. But Vanessa was never satisfied. When she was younger, she blamed me for not letting her chase her wild dreams of moving to Los Angeles to make it big. She said I forced her to live small. I thought I was protecting her. Now I wonder if I just became the perfect villain in her story. I remember one holiday in particular, the first Christmas after Walter died. I cooked a full dinner, set the table for just the two of us. Vanessa walked in, took one look at the turkey and the candles, and sighed like she'd been forced to be there. She picked at her food and barely spoke. Then she said it so casual, it felt like a punch I didn't see coming. "Sometimes I wish you weren't around, Mom. Life would be easier." I laughed nervously, hoping she didn't mean it. But deep inside, I knew she did. What would you do if the child you raised with your whole heart began treating you like the obstacle in their life? I brushed it off back then, telling myself it was grief talking. But maybe that was the first red flag I chose to ignore. Family gatherings only got worse with time. When Vanessa married Mark, I thought I was gaining a son-in-law, maybe even some warmth. But Mark fueled her resentment instead. He encouraged her to set boundaries, which quickly turned into excluding me from birthdays, Thanksgivings, and even small get-togethers. I'd hear about family dinners after they happened. I was always the outsider. Still, I kept hoping. I thought maybe if I left her something big, something undeniable, she'd see how much I loved her. I had been considering giving her and Mark $200,000 from my retirement savings as a living legacy. I thought maybe it would fix things between us, show her she mattered. But one summer barbecue changed everything. I had been invited only because Mark's mother insisted. I stood by the patio table, holding a plate of fruit salad, when I overheard Vanessa talking to her friends. They laughed as she mocked me. My mom is just old and useless. I can't wait until I don't have to deal with her anymore. She didn't know I was behind her. My plate slipped a little, the fork rattling against it. I froze, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. Tell me, if you heard your child speak of you that way, would you still open your wallet for them? Or would you finally see the truth staring you in the face? As the years dragged on, the betrayal only got deeper. I had a minor fall one winter, slipped on the icy driveway, and had to be taken to the ER. It wasn't serious, just a bruised hip and some bed rest. I waited for Vanessa to visit, to at least check if her mother was okay. She never came. Instead, she called 3 days later, her voice impatient. "Did you update the will yet?" That was her first question. Not, "How are you, Mom?" Not, "Do you need help?" Just the will. I hung up on her that day, tears streaming down my face. The realization hit me harder than the fall ever did. My daughter didn't want me around. She only wanted what I could give her after I was gone. I started noticing small things. Vanessa would suddenly be interested in visiting whenever she thought she could get her hands on my financial papers. One afternoon, I walked into my home office and froze. She was there, her back to me, rifling through my drawers. "Vanessa?" My voice shook, not from anger, but heartbreak. She turned around, startled, then rolled her eyes. "I was just looking for some papers. Don't be so dramatic." But I wasn't imagining it. I saw the bank statements in her hand, the ones I kept tucked away. And in that moment, my last ounce of denial vanished. She wasn't curious. She was desperate. Desperate enough to betray her own mother. If you caught your child digging through your life like that, would you still believe they loved you? Or would you finally admit the love had died long ago? I confronted her that evening. The words slipped out, trembling, broken. "Why are you going through my things, Vanessa?" Her face hardened. "Because everything you have should have been mine years ago," she snapped. "You're just sitting on money while I'm struggling, and I'm sick of waiting." I could barely recognize the person standing in front of me. This wasn't my daughter. It was someone consumed by greed, bitterness, and rage. My throat tightened and I begged, "You don't talk to me that way. I've given you everything I could."
She scoffed.
"Not enough. Never enough." Later that night, when I went back to my office to lock away my papers, I found something that made my stomach turn. A loan document, hidden among the scattered files, with my signature at the bottom. Only, it wasn't my signature. Vanessa had forged it. The air left my lungs. My own daughter had faked my name to try to take money that wasn't hers. I sat in that chair for hours, shaking, staring at the evidence of betrayal. The woman I once cradled as a baby now saw me as nothing more than a bank account. What would you do if you found out your child was willing to commit a crime against you? Would you still protect them? Or would you finally protect yourself? My breath caught in my throat as the paper slipped from my fingers. If she was willing to take me to court, what else was she willing to do? The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt like my entire life was on trial. I sat in that cold courtroom, hands trembling in my lap, while Vanessa sat across from me in a press suit, her eyes sharp with anger and greed. She had a lawyer, a man who spoke confidently about how I was unfit and how my actions had caused her distress. They painted me as some bitter old woman who was hoarding money and punishing her daughter out of spite. My stomach turned. How could my own child do this to me in front of strangers? When it was my turn to speak, my voice shook, but the words came from a place of truth. I told the judge about raising Vanessa alone after Walter passed, about the sacrifices, the endless nights of worry, the dreams I had put aside. And then I told them about the words that had burned into my heart. The best gift would be if you were sick and away. The courtroom fell silent. My tears slipped down my cheeks as I asked, "Is that the kind of love a mother should receive after giving her all?" The judge leaned back, his expression unreadable, but when he finally spoke, his words felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. Case dismissed. My daughter's face twisted with rage as the gavel came down. She had lost, at least in that room. But as I gathered my things and walked toward the door, Vanessa appeared in the hallway. She leaned close, her voice low and filled with venom. "You haven't seen the last of me, Mom." My legs nearly gave out. What else could she possibly do now that the law had rejected her claim? I couldn't sleep after that day. Every creak in the house made me jump. Every shadow outside made me wonder if she was watching. My once cozy home had become a place of fear. I thought about packing up and leaving, moving into some quiet nursing facility miles away where she couldn't find me. But the thought of leaving my home, the place Walter and I had built together, broke my heart. One morning, as I sat on my porch clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee, a young woman from next door waved at me. Her name was Lily. She had recently moved in with her little boy. She walked over and asked gently, "Are you okay? You look like you've been carrying the world on your shoulders." Something in her voice cracked open the wall I had built around myself. For the first time in months, I spoke freely. I told her pieces of what had happened. Not everything, but enough for her to understand why I felt so broken. She listened without judgment, her eyes full of kindness. That small act gave me a flicker of hope. Maybe not all bonds were poisoned. Maybe family didn't have to mean blood. As I watched her walk back to her house, her son tugging at her hand, I made a decision. I wasn't going to run away anymore. Vanessa had taken enough from me. It was time to stand up, not just for my money, but for my dignity. But how could one old woman fight back against her own daughter's cruelty? I went back to see Mr. Clayton, the lawyer, and this time I had a new request. "I want to rewrite everything," I said firmly. "The will, the accounts, all of it. I don't want Vanessa to get a single dime." His eyebrows lifted, but he nodded. I told him I wanted my estate to go to charity and to the neighbor girl who had shown me more compassion in a few weeks than my own daughter had in years. "I want it all in writing," I added. We spent hours going over details. I made sure there was no loophole, no way for Vanessa to twist things in her favor. I also wrote a letter, sealed and notarized, laying out everything she had done, her threats, her cruelty, even the forged document. It would live alongside the will as a record of the truth. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my own life again. When I walked out of that office, the air felt lighter. I thought maybe, just maybe, I had finally found peace. But peace has a way of slipping away when danger lurks close. That evening, as I prepared dinner, I heard pounding at the door. My heart sank. Through the glass I saw Vanessa and Mark, standing there, their faces hard and determined. They hadn't come to visit. They had come to demand. They stormed into my living room without waiting to be invited. Mark's voice was harsh as he said, "You're going to give us the money, Evelyn. Enough of this game." I stood my ground, even as my knees trembled. Vanessa's eyes darted around the house like she was already deciding what would be hers. "I've changed everything," I said, my voice steady even though my chest was pounding. "You won't see a cent from me." Vanessa's face twisted. "You ruined my life," she shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of her rage. Mark stepped closer, his fists clenched. I took a step back, but I didn't falter. "No, Vanessa," I said softly yet firmly. "You ruined ours." At that moment, a noise broke through the tension, the sound of sirens growing louder, closer. Vanessa's eyes widened. She rushed to the window just as police lights flashed outside. Mark cursed under his breath. They had no idea Lily had called the police when she saw them storming into my house. Within minutes, officers were inside, separating us, asking questions, taking notes. When I showed them the forged loan papers and told them about the threats, everything began to fall into place. The sight of my daughter being led away in handcuffs should have destroyed me. Instead, I felt an aching sorrow mixed with undeniable relief. Vanessa was arrested for fraud and attempted elder abuse. She screamed my name as they took her out, but I knew it was over, at least for now. She looked me in the eye without a hint of shame and said, "You're old, Mom. Just go away. I need the money now." The words echoed in my ears like a curse. I stood frozen, clutching the edge of the counter to keep from collapsing. It was no longer about the loan she had forged or the papers she had stolen. This was about her wanting me gone, out of sight, out of her life, maybe even out of this world. My throat went dry. I whispered, "So that's it? You want me out of your life completely?" She shrugged like it was nothing. It would make everything easier. The air between us felt heavy, choking. I had never felt so unwanted in my entire life. I had given up my dreams, my retirement comfort, even parts of my health, just so she could have more than I ever did. And now the only gift she wanted was my absence. The sting of betrayal burned hotter than fire. I turned away, tears sliding down my face, but inside me something hardened. Enough was enough. I decided right then that I needed to protect myself before it was too late. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how a mother could end up as the enemy in her daughter's eyes. I thought about walking into a bank the next morning and transferring all my money away, but I knew she'd find a way to twist it. No, I needed real protection, legal protection. I whispered to myself, "I'm going to see a lawyer." That decision was the first breath of strength I'd taken in years. But would it be enough to save me from what Vanessa was planning next? The following morning, I sat in a wood-paneled office across from a man named Mr. Clayton. His glasses sat low on his nose, and his voice was calm but firm. After I explained everything, Vanessa's words, the forged signature, her threats, he folded his hands and leaned forward. "Mrs. Harper, I've been doing this for 30 years. Families destroy each other over inheritance. You need to protect your assets immediately." His words made me shiver. "Protect myself from my own child?" He continued, "Change your will. Cancel any access she has to your accounts. If she's already forged your name once, she'll try again." I nodded slowly, realizing he was right. My love for Vanessa had blinded me for too long. This was no longer about family, it was survival. As I left his office with the new documents tucked in my purse, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and strength. For the first time in years, I was doing something for myself. But as the elevator doors closed, a thought hit me like a hammer. If Vanessa found out what I was doing, she would explode. She wasn't going to just accept losing access to my money. She would fight, and she would fight dirty. That night, as I prepared tea in the quiet of my kitchen, I heard the front door slam open. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. Vanessa stood there, eyes blazing, her body trembling with rage. She knew. She had found out. My hand shook as I put the cup down. Realizing I was about to face a storm, I wasn't sure I could survive. The fight that followed still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. Vanessa's voice rose like a hurricane tearing through the walls. "How dare you try to cut me off? After everything I've put up with from you." Her hands flew as she shouted, her face twisted with fury. I tried to calm her, but the more I spoke, the louder she screamed. And then she said it again, the cruelest sentence I've ever heard from her lips. The best gift would be if you were sick and away. The words cut me open all over again, even sharper this time. My body shook as I finally snapped. Then you get nothing. I yelled back, my voice cracking. Not a single penny, Vanessa. If my presence is such a curse, then my money will never be your blessing. Her face went pale, then dark with fury. She pointed a finger at me, her voice low and venomous. You'll regret this, Mom. I'll make you pay for this. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. My knees buckled, and I sat on the floor, gasping for air. My daughter was no longer just ungrateful. She was dangerous. I had taken a stand, but I knew in my bones this wasn't over. It was only the beginning of a war. After that night, I stopped answering her calls. I canceled the transfer I had once planned, and instead I started donating in secret to charities I trusted. I gave to a local children's library, a food pantry, even a women's shelter. For the first time in years, I felt like my money was making a difference, not just feeding my daughter's endless greed. Vanessa noticed quickly. She left voicemails that started with fake sweetness. Mom, I was just thinking about you. And ended with angry threats when I didn't respond. Don't you dare give away what's mine. At first, I felt guilty, sitting alone at my dining table, staring at the silent phone. But then, late one evening, I stepped outside and froze. My car sat in the driveway, its tires slashed, rubber shredded and curling on the pavement. My heart pounded as I looked around the dark street. No one was there, but I didn't need proof. I knew in my gut who had done it. Would your child go this far? Would they destroy your peace just to force your hand? I wanted to believe I was wrong, but the fear in my chest told me otherwise. And I had no idea what Vanessa's next move would be. It didn't take long before she found a new way to strike. Words spread through the neighborhood, whispers I could hear when I went to the grocery store or the post office. People would look at me with pity in their eyes. My neighbor, Mrs. Dorsey, stopped me once and said, "Are you all right, Evelyn? I heard from Vanessa that you've been confused lately."
Confused.
That was the word she used. Vanessa had been telling people I was losing my mind, that I couldn't handle my affairs anymore. Slowly, the image I had built over a lifetime, steady, responsible, respected, was being torn apart by my own daughter's lies. I stopped going out as much. I avoided gatherings. My house grew quieter and lonelier by the day. I sat in my chair by the window, wondering if I had made the right decision cutting her off. Maybe if I had just given her the money, she wouldn't have gone this far. But then I reminded myself, if someone can wish you sick and gone, no amount of money will ever be enough. Just as I was starting to gather strength again, a letter arrived in the mail. My hands shook as I tore it open. It was from a law office. Vanessa was suing me. The papers claimed I had caused her emotional damages by withholding financial support. My own daughter was dragging me into court, trying to use the system to take what I had refused to give. Months passed after that night, and slowly the wounds began to heal. My home grew peaceful again. I started volunteering at the local library, reading to children whose eyes lit up with joy at every story. Sundays became my favorite days, spent with Lily and her little boy. Their laughter filled the spaces that once held only silence and fear. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit in my chair and think about the way things ended. It still hurt, knowing the child I raised could turn against me so fiercely. But I also realized something important. Family is not always the people who share your blood. Sometimes it's the people who show you kindness when you least expect it. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. It was a public notice. Vanessa and Mark had filed for bankruptcy. They had lost everything after losing me as their safety net. I folded the paper and set it aside without a word. The anger I once carried was gone. All that remained was a quiet kind of acceptance. As I watched Lily's son chase fireflies in the yard that evening, I whispered to myself, "Don't ever let anyone make you feel like a burden." Sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is walking away. And now I ask you, what would you have done if your own child told you that your absence would be the greatest gift? Would you forgive, or would you find the strength to cut ties? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know I'm not the only one who's lived through this kind of heartbreak.